Papaschase means in Cree? Alright, we got that right there from my brother there. He's from the Michelle band, also affected by the policies from Frank Oliver back in the day. So my name is Conor Kerr. I'm a direct descendant of Charles Bateau Gladue. He would have been my great-great-grandfather. He was a headman for Chief Papaschase when they signed Treaty 6 back in the day. And so I was fortunate enough that I was raised by my grandmother, and I got to hear the stories. My grandmother was raised by her grandmother, a lady named Genevieve Rivard. And she's from she was born on the Papaschase territory. As my grandmother points out, every time we drive over the high-level bridge, and she looks down where the low-level bridge was, she goes to me, she's like, that's where my granny was born, right there, right there. And it's, right now it's kind of, it's right by the Kingsman, actually, in that spot. That's the traditional territory. And this place exists all throughout Edmonton that we're not acknowledging in terms of who they are. And we hear these questions like, oh, this is ancient history. This has gone on for like years and years and years ago. I was asked, how does this affect you? But my grandmother was raised by her grandmother, who was born on the Papaschase First Nation. She had to leave that territory when she was 12 years old. She had to go and leave this home that she had been in for her entire life up to that point. And she ended up in the St. Lina, St. Paul area. And that's where my grandmother was raised. And she was raised with the stories from the Papaschase First Nation and also from the Métis community in this Edmonton area. This has been an area of trade and just multicultural aspects for years and years and years before there were any colonial people in this area, before there was anyone coming in. This was all about the people and the people from this land. And when I stand up here today, I'm doing this for my grandmother, whose voice was completely lost and she was not able to tell us stories. I'm saying this for my grandmother's grandmother, how she never had that opportunity. She left Edmonton when she was, or Papaschase First Nation, when she was 12 years old. And she came back in the night. Everyone in my family lives till they're like 100 for some reason, which is actually like pretty sweet. But she came back in like the 1950s from the St. Lina area when her family moved back to Edmonton. And could you imagine coming back into a city that looks completely different, in a territory that looks completely different than the one you left, the one you were born in, the one you were raised in, and how that would feel to have areas celebrating the people who actively work to kick you out of that area when you come back in. And we wonder why there's so many people who are disenfranchised and lost, when we're continually being surrounded by these acts of celebration of these people who have done numerous things over the courses of their lives. We need to start acknowledging history, but we need to start acknowledging all areas of history, not just the good ones, not just the bad ones, but everything that's out there. And that's what, when I come here today, I'm not going to talk about how we should rename a neighborhood or anything like that. That's not for me to say. That's for elders from Enoch Cree Nation, from Papaschase First Nation, from Michelle Band, elders who are and leaders from the communities to go and to work with elected officials from the city of Edmonton to talk about these neighborhoods. That's not for us to decide. That's for the elders and their knowledge to work for. But what we need to start working for is having these conversations, to start listening about the Papaschase history that exists. Don Iveson released a little thing on Global Media or Edmonton Journal a couple minutes before this, and he didn't mention the Papaschase First Nation. He talked about the Enoch Cree Nation, which were affected very terribly, but he never mentioned the Papaschase First Nation. And why is that? Why did he gloss over an entire First Nation that was completely dissolved and gone? I don't know, but you gotta start questioning those kind of things. Why did he not mention that? He knows who the Papaschase First Nation people were. And we should know who the Papaschase First Nation people were. If we don't, then I'm absolutely dishonoring my grandmother and her legacy and her story. She never had the opportunity to share that. She never had the ability to have her voice heard. She was one of the people that never was allowed to exist within this society, within this land that was traditionally hers. She was actively being told that she was not allowed to be here from all aspects of this society. And she thrived within it, even despite those things. For all the grandmothers, for the great-grandmothers, the matriarchs, and their absolute strength to continue to persevere and to have that sense of humor and to create and carry on these stories and pass them down generation to generation. I feel completely honored that I was able to be raised by my grandmother and to hear the stories from the Métis community and to travel around Saskatchewan with her when I was a kid and go and hang out on Enoch and listen to the elders talk and listen to their words and their wisdom and hear the jokes and hear the laughter and hear what this land is about. And it's a welcoming area. I personally believe that when my grandmother's father went with Chief Papaschase to sign Treaty 6, that when they did so, they meant it for this land to be a welcoming land for everybody to be a part of, no matter what your background is, to share the land, to live together in harmony and to be together. And right now, we are not doing that well. And we need to start thinking and start questioning our elected officials, as Marissa mentioned. Start questioning the people that are around and ask them, what are you doing in your area to work towards decolonization? What are you doing to work towards the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's recommendations? How can we move forward and start doing these sorts of things? How can we start having these conversations without people getting super, super upset and going on Facebook and hiding behind their internet aliases and just throwing stuff out? Before this, I made the mistake of accidentally going on like the comment thread for one of the news media articles, which is always like an absolutely terrible thing to do. You see the worst in like humanity come out. And so I'm looking through the comments and I'm thinking to myself, like, I don't know if I want to go up there and I don't know if I want to talk anymore. Like, no one, like it's wasted words. I don't know if there's a point to this when you see that. And, you know, I was thinking to myself when I was really struggling with going up and sharing the story of my grandmother's family and sharing our relation to the land. And I do what I always do when I start to struggle. I go back to where the land, where it always matters, and that usually means I have to go chop wood on Enoch for hours on end, but thank God the elder out there got a brand new chainsaw, so it's like slicing the wood like butter finally, and usually I'm just like dying after a few hours of lifting this wood around, but this was a good one. I was like, thank you so much for getting this new chainsaw. But I was chatting with the elder on Enoch there, and I was talking about my grandma's story and how I wanted to share and how now I'm not sure if I really want to do that or go about doing that anymore. And he says to me, you know what, this is an opportunity for you to go, and you don't have to do anything, but your voice needs to be validated, and the voices of your ancestors need to be validated, because back in the day, they never worked. And I always like to tell this story. So I live in Hazeldean right now, which is on traditional Papaschase First Nation territory, and when I first moved into my house, I brought my grandmother. She's up in Castle Downs, and she's this hilarious, tiny little lady, and if you ran her in the street, she might just knock your knee for like no reason. She's just like angry little lady, but she's absolutely funny. And so I brought her by the house, and you know, I'm showing it to her, and I'm like, Grandma, this is where I'm living. Like, this is a spot. What do you think of it? And she goes and she's looking around. She's checking it all out. She's looking around the neighborhood. She's like, this is good. Because when they give us the land back, you can keep your house and they'll tear down all the rest of it around here. I'm like, I don't know if that's actually going to happen, but it's a good sentiment around it. And you know, it's those stories and those reactions, and that's what we need to keep moving forward together. When I see everyone out here today, I see faces of hope and people who want to actually have these conversations and to start that dialogue to move forward. And that's what we need to be doing. We need to be questioning not just Frank Oliver or John A. MacDonald like they're doing in Ontario and here too, but all these aspects of our history. Start looking into the real aspects of history and sharing them and talking about them, and not just brushing over these things that we wanted to hidden for so long. I don't want my children to grow up in a world where they can't learn about their history. I don't want them to go through the university system and be continually put down for their beliefs and their culture. I want them to be able to thrive in a world and on a land that is where they are meant to be. When I look around Edmonton, I feel connected to every aspect of this city. Whether it's the river, whether it's the trees, whether it's just these beautiful neighborhoods and the people that exist within Edmonton. I think it's a very, very friendly city. It's a place where we can start and we can be leaders with this change and we can start moving forward. So when our children and our children's children start going, we're not even having this conversation. I'm out of a job, we're not even working in this anymore because we're not even thinking about First Nations and Indigenous and Métis and Inuit and history anymore. We're not questioning why we're learning about it. We're not questioning why we're talking about it. It's just there. It's just a part of our culture. It's a part of our society. It's now a part of who we are as Canadians and people who are living on Treaty 6 territory, or if you move up north, Treaty 8 territory. But you need to learn those stories. And I really appreciate you coming out here today. The Papaschase First Nation needs to have their stories shared. My grandmother's father, who was the whitest dude in the world, and I got his genetics, he was very instrumental in the 1960s on starting to do research towards the Papaschase First Nation and start digging out the genealogical charts and to start looking at the baptism records and to start finding the people who were members of the Papaschase First Nation. And he had no real position to be doing that besides his wife, and his wife who had lost her voice. And he wanted to start moving this forward. And we need to start doing whatever we can to start learning these historical aspects and to start talking to members who are people who are descended from the Papaschase First Nation, people on the Enoch, people on the Michelle Band, people from these areas, and hear their stories and actually listen for once and not just gloss it over and not just forget these stories. And we need to keep that connection going. So I want to thank all of you from the bottom of my heart for being here today and for inviting me to speak. It's an honor to stand up here and to share this story, and I feel proud to be the grandson of my grandmother, to be the great-great-grandson of Genevieve Rivard, who was the last one member of my family to have lived on Papaschase First Nation. So hi, thank you very much. Mase Cho, Masi.